topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's wonderful to be here with you. It's Tuesday, and just love it. So the question to ask yourself is that, are you going to go with the hype? Are you going to go with what everybody says? Or you can step into these changing times with AI and the market and all of that going in while keeping people at the forefront and in line of sight. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you, Divya. Thanks so much for having me on your show today. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yes, excited to have you on the show. So, Sherry, you have a beautiful background. Share with us if you recall a moment or a person who left a positive mark on you.
Sure. So I mean, of course, I would have to say my mother, but there's really a bigger story of the impact that she's really had in my life. So, my mom would always say, Sherry, everybody's got problems. If you put them in the middle of a room and you had to pick out a problem, you'd probably take your own back. But there was, so right, like she always says, like, people have bigger problems than you. So that's kind of how I've led my life and my career of you can always overcome whatever's in front of you. And then 2.5 years ago, my husband passed away suddenly.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But it was a moment. And of course, the first person that I called was my mother. And she says, hang up the phone. She lived a couple hours away. And she said, I'll be right there. So, and the police officers were over, all these things were going on. And they're like, who can you call? Who can you call? And of course, I have 2 daughters. The daughters have friends. There were people I could call, but I was like, I just have to wait for my mother. Like, it was like, I have to wait for my mother because she's just been that calming kind of steady, we've got this, like, no matter what happens in life, you can overcome it. And so here I am. There's I think all of us in life, we go through challenges, and I've kind of reflected since that moment of leading people. And I do a lot of work in digital transformation, right? We all talk about digital transformation and how it's hard, but it's really about the people and the leading people through challenges and change, and really just being able to overcome whatever's in front of you or whatever seems difficult or challenging.
So I just want to do a gentle check-in with you, Sherry. How are you and your family doing?
Oh, thank you. Everybody's doing well. It was a journey, as you can imagine, but everyone's doing well. My younger daughter is at the University of Kentucky, and my older daughter, she's doing well and is working at an association. So it's very exciting.
And that's wonderful. And here's the thing, right? We never realize, like, the value of the people that we have in our lives. And also when they're gone, the key thing is that, as you mentioned, that even though the problem seems insurmountable, but like as your mom says, that as they say that, life goes on. So coming back to you, as you were growing up, did you have any specific interests that, I want to be this, I want to be that?
Yes, I actually did. So most of my work is in the association and nonprofit space, working with mission-driven organizations. I didn't think I was going to be on a journey where I was running a consulting company. However, when I was 14, I always wanted to lead a nonprofit. I thought that's what I was going to do. And my journey's somewhat there. I obviously I'm working in that space, but I never fully led a nonprofit, but I work with a lot of them in a different capacity. So again, a little bit of a winding journey, but I always wanted to kind of do mission-driven work.
Mm. And do you know what influenced your desire for that?
I think I grew up in a relatively small town, and it just seemed like everybody took care of each other, right? It was a community. I grew up in the church. Everybody just. So I don't know if it was kind of ingrained in me, or I was watching way too much Oprah. I don't know one or the other.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, your journey has been with nonprofit organizations and associations. So tell us a bit more about it. Like, which captured your heart and where did you go?
Sure. So so when I got out of college, I actually worked at Panasonic, and I was there for 2 years. I have an interesting story because my boss was amazing, very supportive, amazing person. I was in a male dominant environment, high pressure environment. And I kept telling him that I wanted to work for a nonprofit. And so one day I told him I was leaving to go work for a nonprofit. I went to that organization and I felt like I went 10 years backwards. They had some of you listeners may know what a wing system is, but I went from this PC environment to that. There were all these other things. So I called my boss and I said, I can't be in this job. I need to come back. And he said, come over and talk to me and my wife and we'll talk about it. So I did. I went to his house that night and he said, give it 30 days. And then after 30 days, if you still hate it, you can come back and work at Panasonic. And I gave it 30 days. And then that was my journey. I ended up working at this association where their CEO came up to me and said, can you help us develop our website? And that was when nobody had a website. I was like, what's a website? So I went to Barnes and Nobles. I figured out what a website was. And then that was my journey. And I've been in the association and nonprofit space ever since.
Yeah. So that it's a powerful story. And you referred to being in Panasonic and then sharing that. So that it was more that you were one of the few as a female. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
So yes. I'm assuming that was in 1990s.
Yes, that was 1992 to 1994. I was there.
So how did you navigate the journey then? And so many times what happens is that even today, actually yesterday I was having a conversation with someone. People are like, there are some professions where women are the only ones. Like, it's like the lonely only.
Yes.
So then how did you navigate the situation? Because even today, a lot of women are talking about it.
Yes. I believe I talk to a lot of women about, their own career journeys and some of their challenges. First, I will say I was blessed with great bosses and mentors. When I worked at Panasonic, it was not only very male dominant, the culture was very different. And I recall, I was a kid. I was just happy to have a job, right? I didn't care. Like, I'll do whatever, whatever they want me to do. And this group came in from Japan. They were sitting in the conference room, and I said, I'll go get them coffee. And my boss, the great one who said, stay in the job for 30 days, even though I knew he wanted me to come back. But he said, and he was he was very high up, general manager. I don't recall his exact title, but he said, you're not going and getting coffee. And I was like, I'm not doing anything else. I can go downstairs and get the coffee. And he said, no, I'm going to go with you. And that was just a moment that stood out, like, for the rest of my career, because he didn't want me, even though, again, I was just out of college, but to be perceived as beneath anybody. And so I don't know if that gave me the confidence then to, to make sure not only that I wasn't seen as less, but that other people throughout my career were seen too. It was like a moment of being seen, I guess.
Absolutely, because the perception is going to be there regardless of, whatever you are doing. So it's important that you tailor that perception to how you want to be seen. And that's what branding is. And going back to it, kudos to your boss. And this illustrates that for any success to happen, it's a partnership. It doesn't matter. It's not women versus men. It's not, anyone versus anyone. It's about coming together and having that partnership together. And we are stronger together. So that's such a beautiful story of the support. So then, kind of coming back to your nonprofit, a lot of people end up in jobs that they think, like, they're not going to like it. And so many times what happens is that they may not have the venue to go back to their old jobs.
Right.
When people are in that situation, what would you tell them?
Well, that's a good question. What would I tell them? So, I do have a friend right now that's she's not happy in her role, but she loves her team, right? So, focusing on the things that bring you joy in your job, whatever that might be. And sometimes you have to just look for another job, right? Like, sometimes you just have to, I always tell people, don't quit your job, just, unless you're so miserable, but you don't want to just necessarily get up and leave, but find those things that you want to do. One advice, though, that I do give people is when I left my second association job to start my consulting business, I made a list of everything I love to do and everything I hated doing. So that helped me kind of define, people had me on a different path. I had always said, as I started this conversation, I always wanted to be a CEO of a nonprofit, right? Like, I wanted to be the executive director. Through my career journey, when I started looking at the things that I love to do, I love solving problems. I love being in projects. Those are the things that I loved. And leading an organization and managing staff and navigating a board at that point in my life wasn't the path. So I really had to take a hard look at what I love doing, and then carved out a career around what I love doing. I loved helping people. I loved solving problems. So I encourage people to do that, really take a hard look at because sometimes people believe that they're on a certain path and need to go down a certain road, but they might not like those things that job requires, right?
Right. And what I'm hearing is that, especially if you're in a job that's not relevant to you, that's just kind of feeling like, it's not bringing me joy. So when it is like that, then, take a look at what's
Yeah.
right for you. So this way, when you're looking at that, okay, so many things are going right for me, then it does not create that urgency and the emotional charge from where, if you're making the decisions, those decisions are not going to be regret proof, because decisions made out of the emotions are usually going to take you down maybe sometimes a good path, but it can be something that's not that you want. So I like what
Yeah.
you're saying. And then look for
Yeah,
what you
I'll
want.
add to
Yeah.
that as you're talking, I was just thinking that, sometimes, a lot of times people leave their jobs because of their boss, right?
Oh yeah, toxic boss.
Right. Yeah. But sometimes I'll say, look at what is the reason, like, why are they behaving this way? Why are they
Mhm.
trying to control things? What has happened, to kind of give it a little different perspective, that maybe there's some empathy for that person. Sometimes there's not, right? But sometimes looking at it from either their perspective or trying to think of the situation a little bit differently, sometimes can, or sometimes it's just having those conversations of what the challenges are, right?
Yeah.
And seeing underneath why there's frustration or those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just recently, like, yesterday I was talking with a client and she had a long laundry list against her boss. And I asked her, she said, "Oh, these are the patterns." And I said, like, okay, how many days have you observed? She said, "Oh, 2 days a week," because their hybrid is only 2 days a week when she sees them in person. And when I asked her to investigate, I'm like, okay, go and see when is he showing up during the other 3 days. She said, "Oh yeah, he's there from 7 to 8."
Mm.
So just the perceptions can be and the assumptions that we make can be misleading. Now, as you mentioned that, you are with nonprofit organizations, like with a couple of nonprofit organizations, what would be your message to them? Like, what are the few things that they could build on, especially when somebody's thinking of starting a nonprofit?
So, through, we're everybody right now, let's just talk about kind of you know, the buzz or the hype around AI and technology. I get
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of calls from CEOs that say, I need this shiny new thing, or we need a new learning management system, or, we've got to figure out this AI thing. And the advice that I've been giving people today is that, yes, you may need that infrastructure, but the technology is not going to transform your organization. It's the people. So how do you, when everything seems to be changing today, how do we work to help people grow, not fear technology, get on board with the vision and the mission of the organization? So that's one thing that I think is just something that we all need to be thinking about today. And the other piece of this is that relationship between your board and the staff and the CEO. That is really important. Successful organizations have a really good relationship between the board and what the board's role is and what the staff role is. And a lot of times we see a lot of conflict between those boards and the staff, and that doesn't help grow an organization at all.
absolutely. And so many times what happens is, like, so for example, if a startup has become, they've had a good run and then they become a public company. So what happens is from that, like in a startup company, usually that closeness is there because
Mhm.
it's a smaller group of people. Now, as the company is growing, that distance between the board and the employees gets bigger and bigger, the CEOs have more responsibility, like the executive team has more responsibility on their shoulders, like, they got to please the shareholders now. But that's something that may not be in alignment with the employees. So what can the board do where they're not just coming down hard, like, we got to get it done, got to get it done, got to get it done, and still bring people along?
Sure. Well, like if you look at things like strategic planning, right? The board is in a room, let's just say, for a couple days talking about the future of the organization and strategy. But a lot of times there's a gap with the staff knowledge that they have to actually implement the plan, right? So I think it's important to bridge that gap. I guess ends up being a communications gap. There's knowledge that's happened in that boardroom that the staff are not aware of. They're not aware of the why. So really taking what the direction is from the board and their vision and making sure it's extremely well communicated, not just communicated, but the why, right? Like the why is what gives people the understanding to be able to execute and not just say, oh, we need to do X because the board said it. I went through, I think it was about 5 CEO transitions in 9 years at my second association. And it just always seemed a little bit chaotic, right? And you didn't really understand what the board's direction is or what the why was, right? We had a list of tasks that needed to get done every year because when there was a new president, we had all new agenda. They wanted a new this, a new website, whatever it might be. And we just executed on it, but I shouldn't say never, but a lot of times didn't know the why. When we had those CEOs there that brought us to the table and were communicating that why and the reasoning and that really kind of, gave us a lot more momentum and understanding and we're much more effective. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also this whole barrier and gap between, oh, this is the executive team and the rest. So as a matter of fact, I was coaching one of the executives. He's on the C-suite team. And I said, like, how about, I know that, you are sharing it down, like top down. What if you had some people that, have the vision and that they challenge you and your decisions?
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your why is what happens is that why just kind of becomes the purpose thing. So rather than keeping it as a purpose and just keeping it as ornamental, making it in day-to-day operations. And when you bring it in your day-to-day operations, people are able to understand that, okay, we got to do this. And it's also the willingness and ability to listen, because sometimes the demand of the market may be, oh, we just got to fix the solution, but then that solution can break down. So listening to your people and seeing where it is and bringing it out. So some great points. So now coming back to the digital transformation, as you were talking about. So when we have this, I always believe in that strategy, the strategic planning. So how are you going about it? Bringing people in. And I know you talk about leading with heart. Tell us about that. So that way, AI or anything like you mentioned, right? It's just a tool.
Right. Well, that's right now, I think people are either really excited or they're terrified, right? Like we have, and so I always tell CEOs and leaders and organizations, even if you're hearing that the staff is excited because you just gave them ChatGPT or whatever the tool might be, there's half of your organization is afraid of it, right? I mean, I've walked into rooms and I was doing some AI training and I went around and asked everybody in the room, and there were people there that says, I don't want to touch it. Right. Like, so having those conversations, I think, is really important. But more than that, when we talk about heart, we talk about and I'll kind of go through kind of the framework, but humanize, like putting people before the process, like what is behind, and this kind of gets into the why, right? Like, why are we doing certain things? Why are we implementing this? And what, what do people need? And in the industry and association industry, we're servicing members. So why are the members asking for certain things? Why do they need a certain technology, and really understanding the why. And then the E stands for empower. So empowering your staff. I mean, we're working with an organization right now that there's a lot of frustration, but there was a challenge. Something happened at this organization where they were potentially going to be sued. So everybody pulled back, the CEO, the board, and the staff's no longer empowered. So that's creating, frustration. And to really grow an organization, empowering your team is extremely important. And then we talk about, ascend and making sure that the team feels like they can rise above whatever those challenges are, right? So being able to have the courage and the voice, kind of when we talked about back at Panasonic, that was like transformative. Like all of a sudden I was a kid and had, the courage that, okay, I had a voice and I was seen, right? So making sure that your people are seen and they have a voice at the table. I think, you just talked about that a little bit as well. And then reimagining. So the R's for reimagine, like reimagining what can be better. Now we have these tools, whether it's AI or some other technology. How do we use it to our fullest? How do we rethink our current processes? And reimagining doesn't mean like starting from scratch. It's kind of like, it's just about seeing things a little bit differently. And then to that point, then the fourth pillar or the fifth pillar is transformation and letting go of those old identities. And we all hang on to those old beliefs, limiting beliefs. And how do we get beyond that to transform either for ourselves or for our organizations? And again, I kind of look at that, on both sides. When you think about, what is going to help me move to the next better version of myself, it's really getting, away from those limiting beliefs and those challenges that you have to kind of grow into that next version of yourself or your organization. So that's kind of the 5 pillars of heart when I talk about heart. And what has happened, over my career, again, we get those calls of, we need the shiny new thing, whatever it is. But technology doesn't transform an organization, people do. And technology enables that growth and that transformation, of course. But a lot of times people are afraid, new technology, there's a new project, right? Like, oh no, now you just gave me a whole new project, or I don't understand this technology, or it's kind of fearful. So it's important to bring your people along through that journey in order for it to be successful. And the successful projects and the organizations that have had very successful digital transformations, it's all about the people. It's all about creating those teams, empowering people, because most people in those organizations, they don't know the tech, right? And a lot of them are fearful. So
it's about building that trust with them, that, okay, because as you mentioned, right, you talked about the identity as well. That reimagining doesn't mean that you're just kind of changing. So a lot of companies are rushing to be that AI first, AI native, whatever we want to call it. So if you want to be AI first, it's about building that trust with your people. bringing in their experience, that yes, we are going to bring it in, and it's not that we are going to lay you off, because
Mm-hmm.
that fear can be hanging on people's head, versus like, we are going to empower you, as you mentioned in one of your E's, that you learn, and we are making this company competitive against the other companies. And of course, we have to talk about the competitive advantage over here. It is a must now, but we are doing it together. We are building it with your experience, having that human intervention with some guardrails and with those checks and balances. So that's very powerful. I love what you said about the heart. So do share with us, like, if anybody's thinking about, like, okay, we want to bring in AI, and you talked about bringing in teams. What are some top of the, like, 3 to 4 things that people can keep in mind?
Sure. So I think we're working with an organization. We've worked with several organizations that right now that will call us up and say we need a policy. And yes, we can give them a policy. I have a draft policy, but I was talking to somebody yesterday about the fact that you really want the teams or the organization, the buy-in from staff. So creating a team and talking with them through what are their biggest challenges, how can AI help them with those challenges, and bring them in on developing a policy and why, because that will just help communicate that throughout the organization, right? So you've got a team with some buy-in. They can help educate. It goes back to the why, right? Educate people of why you have a policy. And I'll give you an example. So yesterday, I actually talked to 2 different organizations. And one was like, Sherry, we have to have a policy. We have to have guardrails. People are using it. And it's very top down. The approach was very top down. Mm-hmm. So we talked about, getting a team together and why we don't want to take that approach. Another one was like, yes, we know people are using this. We need to get buy-in and get some guardrails. But they're already talking to the staff about finding those things that are taking a lot of time that AI can do, so they can be more creative, so they can spend more time on the things that they want to do. And it was just a different conversation from these 2 leaders of how they're approaching it into their organizations. But I do think that, having the kind of an AI team, for lack of a better term, and creating what those guardrails are and why, looking at the organizational goals and how AI can approach, can support those goals. But the one thing I would say first to do is training, because there is a gap in the training, and staff's having a hard time making some of those decisions without understanding what is machine learning, what is a large language model, how does AI really work? Like, it's not just magic, right?
Yes.
Feels like it sometimes, but how the technology actually works, I think is really, really important. And people are rushing to the tool without spending that time on the training piece of it. So I think that's really, really important.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Sherry, because unless you know what it can do for you, unless you know your processes, unless you know where there are gaps and where it can help you the best, because so that was one of the very similar stories one of my clients had mentioned. Like, he came to me after they had purchased a multi-million-dollar AI tool, and it was completely not the right fit for their company. And I'm sure you have seen something similar to that. And then it's like, sunk cost bias. You're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it doesn't work. So the key is looking at your processes and, like, what can be automated and what
Yes.
can be still kept. And strategizing it, coming back to the strategic plan, so important. So
Yes.
definitely some great nuggets over here. And I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking, okay, how can we connect with Sherry? So share with us, where can they connect with you? And where can they be found? Like, where can you be found? And anything
Yeah,
else you'd like to share?
great. Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I post almost every day. So follow me on LinkedIn, or you can reach me at info@orgsource.com. I am releasing a book around this heart framework. It's called Rug the Book is the website. So that will be published early in the year, but it's all about kind of helping people thrive through disruption and how to lead teams. So we're really excited about that. And yeah, so I would love to connect with anyone who wants to talk about leading in this digital world, or helping with organizational kind of transformation.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us, Sherry. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you, wonderful audience, because without you, the show would not be possible. We love you, and we want to bring you the best stories. We want to bring you what you need. So do share with us, what is it that you need, and how can we serve and support you to live the life you want and the life you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.